Hey Sam, hope you're having a great week. New topics to talk about, so let's just jump into them. The Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts have both seen decreasing numbers in enrollment over the past few years, peaking back in 1972 and down from 2.8 million to 2.3 million this year for the Boy Scouts. Due at least in part to these numbers, the Boy Scouts have decided to open up some of their programs to girls. A Boy Scout spokesperson said, "Families today are busier and more diverse than ever. Most are dual earners and there are more single-parent households than ever before, making convenient programs that serve the whole family more appealing." The Girl Scouts are furious about this. One of their spokespersons said, "We are confused as to why, rather than working to appeal to the 90% of boys who are not involved in BSA programs, you would choose to target girls." Cub Scout packs will now be able to open up either co-ed or girl-only groups within their organization. But the biggest change is that girls will now be able to achieve the highest Boy Scout rank of Eagle Scout. As an Eagle Scout, I have mixed thoughts about this. Obviously, I was in a boys-only troop, and there were definitely certain benefits to that. I'm not saying that girls shouldn't be allowed to join the Boy Scouts. I'm saying that for me, it was a positive experience personally to have a boys-only group. But I can't really say that in full knowledge given that I don't know what it would have been like to have girls in my troop. Overall, I think that from a business standpoint, this is a very wise move from the Boy Scouts, and yes, it will probably cause some negative impacts on the Girl Scouts. For the Boy Scouts, it's a very smart enrollment choice. I don't think that we'll see enormous changes in the numbers of Boy Scout enrollment. I think that they are still declining and still will. I really appreciate the stance that the Boy Scouts took on this, though, by saying that this is to provide more convenient programs for the whole household. As an Eagle Scout, I support the Boy Scouts in this decision. We'll have to see exactly what it changes. I don't think that we can say whether it's a bad or good decision until we see the results in the next probably 2 or 3 years. Sam, as a Boy Scout and Eagle Scout yourself, I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts about this? And for any other Boy Scouts or Eagle Scouts or Girl Scouts out there, I'd really like to know if you're in favor of this decision by the Boy Scouts or if you're against this decision and why. So now let's move on to the new thing that I've started doing in the last episode of unrequested recommendations. My 2 to-watch recommendations, first of all, is Blade Runner 2049 out in theaters. If you haven't seen the first one, I would recommend going and watching it, although it's a very bizarre, weird, dark, not so much like thematically dark, but it's a very cinematically dark film. Every shot is very dim. The new film picks up on a lot of the themes of its prequel, though. We see a lot of investigation again into what it means to have identity, but not only what it means to have individual identity like in the first film, we also get to explore in this new film, in the world of replicants, what it means to have some sort of communal identity as well. And also, what does it mean to have your identity taken away and or given to you by someone else? Which seems to lead to the thematic conclusion that you need to choose your own identity, which was seen in both the first film and this one, but in very different ways. My second to watch recommendation is the new video by Bill Wirtz. If you haven't seen his other stuff, like the entire history of the world, but his new video, Soap Tips, I love the style and the voice that he does in it. It's just great. Go watch it. This week, instead of a book, I thought that I would recommend a game. It's a game that's actually been out for quite a while called Stardew Valley. I've played it on my PC, but it's most notably out on the Switch. It's available on almost every platform. If you're looking for a relaxing, engaging, dynamic, pixelated, two-dimensional game, I would highly recommend it. And this week, my 2 music recommendations are Easy Love by Lauv, and of course, Sam Smith just came out with another new single called Pray that I would highly recommend. So with that said, let's jump into today's main topic that I'd like to talk about. Today, I want to talk about news media bias. First, let's just take a look at some of the headlines around President Trump's decisions regarding healthcare recently. The Wall Street Journal, in starting to unwind the health law, Trump to ease insurance rules. You see here that the word unwind is tied to health law, and ease is connected to Trump, providing for an overall positive tone toward the events. In USA Today, how Trump is unraveling Obamacare piece by piece. Unraveling is connected to Trump, and piece by piece is tied to Obamacare. Together, this notes instability, lack of focus, and irrationality, giving the events a more negative tone. From Fox News, Trump clears way for Obamacare alternatives in new executive order, goes around stalled Congress. Clears the way is tied to Trump, denoting a tone of exploration or adventure. Alternatives is tied to Obamacare, which is in all a rather neutral. but goes around stalled is obviously tied to Congress and Trump, connecting the two together. This gives Trump the image of the adventuring or exploring victor and provides Congress with this very sedentary, lazy, stalled imagery. From CNN, Trump begins Obamacare dismantling with executive order. Dismantling is tied to Obamacare and is usually associated with destruction or decommissioning. This doesn't really give the most favorable view of the events. And from BBC News, Trump signs executive order to weaken Obamacare. This one's trickier in my opinion. Weaken seems to be connected to the signing, giving the events an intentionality about the executive order. Those that want to see Obamacare weakened will view this event as a positive thing. Those that want to see Obamacare remain in place as it is or stronger will likely see this as a negative thing. Overall, this headline above all the others seems the most neutral to me. Let me know if you think that I'm off on any of my analyses of these headlines, though. What I'm trying to point out through these headlines, and what can be seen much more in depth in the bodies of all of these articles, which can be found in the links down below, is how mass media today seems to be using consistent prescriptive moral rhetoric. News organizations today, probably because we expect it from them, offer exclusivistic interpretations of causation, intention, and motivation. Again, just look at the articles and their titles and note the differences. There's a theory in media communication studies called agenda setting, which in the past has suggested that mass media, specifically the news mass media, can't tell you or doesn't tell you how to think about things. They just tell you what things to think about. This provides a kind of subversive censorship because some things just won't ever be taught. However, in today's postmodern media, it seems that our media technologies are trying to tell us how to think about things that everyone has already made up their minds about. We have instant updates today about things going on all around the world, specifically those things that are closest to us. And those are entering our eyes and our minds only to have our preconceived ideas applied to them. Why? Because as a society, we are in a crisis of having thrown out old media, old news standards without replacing them with anything new. Instead, every media source in isolation is potentially just as good as any other. It leads us to this myth of objectivity within the news. It seems to me that we don't even think that there is a possibility of news objectivity anymore, in large part because we haven't established what standards there are for that kind of objectivity. How do we implement new standards for mass media and news reporting in a society where anything goes, more or less, so long, of course, as you're going to agree with it before you even see it or hear it? How can news organizations prove to the public that they're objective sources? Or are we as consumers going to accept fully that impartiality is a myth and therefore expect less as the public? And what does this do to the little guys, to local news and local newspapers? Sam, I'd love to know your thoughts on that, and from anyone else. Put those in the comments down below. Finally, what can you as a consumer do? I would say, first of all, expect more. Don't let your news sources slip into the self-fulfilling prophecy of reporting bias. Second, add new news. Don't just listen or watch things that you think that you're probably already going to agree with, be it with their tone, their advertising, or their message. Third, as always, if you can, go to the original source. Get as close as you can to the origin of the news event. This isn't always reasonable, but if possible, it's so much better than just relying on your Twitter feed. And finally, when someone disagrees with you, especially when it's about something that you really hold on to tightly, listen to them. Actually engage with them. Civil discourse is in disarray right now, and we need to bring it back, and we need to find out what that looks like. To wrap up, I have just a few more questions for you. What news sources do you rely on the most? And what news sources do you avoid the most? Also, what do you think can be done about our societal lack of agreed upon standards for news reporting? And last, and I would say most importantly, is impartiality, is objectivity within the news a myth or a future possibility? Sam, I look forward to hearing from you soon about this. As always, please check out the Popular Apocrypha podcast. It's available now on iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher, and soon to be, I think, TuneIn. It's also available on our website, popapoc.com. And we're working on trying to get on Spotify too. We also have a YouTube channel for the podcast that includes gameplay videos and other things like that if you're interested. You can find me on Twitter and the podcast on Twitter. Those are linked down below. Sam, I love you a ton, and I'll see you in the next one.